She kept receipts.
It's 5:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in Durham, North Carolina. The coffee maker gurgles to life in a modest two-story colonial, the kind with beige siding that looks like every other house on the cul-de-sac. Claire Donovan is already awake. Has been for 20 minutes, actually, lying in bed and mentally cataloging everything she needs to handle today. The presentation for the board that her boss will deliver as his own work. The parent-teacher conference her husband forgot about. The birthday card for a colleague who won't remember hers. The lab results that need triple checking because the new hire is brilliant but careless, and nobody else will catch the mistakes before they cascade into disaster. Her feet hit the cold hardwood floor, and she feels it again. That familiar weight in her chest. Not quite dread, not quite exhaustion, just weight. The accumulated mass of 21 years of being the person who handles things. You know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? That bone-deep tiredness that comes not from what you do, but from how little it's seen. Claire Donovan wasn't born tired. She was born in Bensalem, Pennsylvania, in 1971, when the steel mills still pumped smoke into the sky and fathers still believed their union jobs would last forever. Her father, Mike Donovan, had thick hands scarred from hot metal, and her mother, Patricia, had fingers that flew across typewriter keys faster than thought. They lived in a narrow row house with walls so thin you could hear the neighbors' arguments word for word, which Claire often did, pressed against her bedroom wall at night, learning early that marriage could sound like slammed doors and muffled crying. The plant closed when Claire was 14. I need you to understand what that meant in Bensalem in 1985. It meant watching your father, a man who'd never missed a day of work in his life, sit at the kitchen table at 2 p.m. in his undershirt, staring at want ads with reading glasses he was too proud to wear in public. It meant your mother taking a second job, then a third, typing medical records at night until her wrists swelled like sausages and she'd soak them in ice water, biting her lip to keep from crying out. It meant Claire learned to cook dinner for her younger siblings, to forge her mother's signature on permission slips, to smile at the guidance counselor who suggested maybe community college was more realistic for a girl like her. A girl like her, working class, Irish Catholic, from the wrong side of the Philadelphia suburbs. But Claire had something the guidance counselor couldn't see. A mind like a steel trap and a tolerance for thankless work that bordered on superhuman. She waited tables at the Red Lion Diner on Route 1, the kind of place where truckers ordered eggs at midnight and left dollar tips under coffee cups. She'd come home reeking of grease and cigarette smoke, shower with dish soap to cut through it all, then sit at her desk until 3 a.m., teaching herself advanced chemistry from library books held together with rubber bands. She memorized the periodic table like other kids memorized song lyrics. She could balance chemical equations in her head while carrying 4 plates of scrambled eggs and hash browns. When men at the diner made comments about her legs in the uniform skirt, she'd smile sweetly and calculate molecular weights in her head until the urge to dump coffee in their laps passed. Temple University gave her a partial scholarship, partial being the key word. She worked 3 jobs to make up the difference: campus food service at 5 a.m., tutoring freshman chemistry at night. Weekend shifts back at the Red Lion, where the same men now asked why a smart girl like her was still slinging hash. Just temporary, she'd say, refilling their coffee with a smile that never reached her eyes. Everything was temporary. The roach-infested apartment she shared with 3 other girls, the boyfriend who said she studied too much, that she made him feel stupid, the exhaustion that settled into her bones like calcium deposits, hardening with each passing semester. But she graduated. Magna cum laude, 2003. Her parents drove down in their rusty Chrysler, her father wearing the only suit he owned, the one from his wedding, and her mother clutching a disposable camera like it was made of gold. They sat in the nosebleed section of the Liacouras Center, and when Claire walked across that stage, her mother stood up and screamed, "That's my baby," so loud that everyone turned to look. Claire wanted to die of embarrassment. Now, 21 years later, she'd give anything to hear her mother embarrass her like that again. A stroke took Patricia Donovan in 2019, her wrists still swollen from all those years of typing. She went quietly, the same way she'd lived. Invisible to everyone but her family. The biotech boom was just heating up in North Carolina's Research Triangle. Boston was too expensive, California was impossible. But Durham? Durham was still approachable in 2003. You could rent a decent apartment for $600 a month. You could buy a used Honda Civic that only broke down occasionally. You could drive down Highway 147 with the windows down, smelling pine and possibility, and believe that maybe, finally, your real life was about to begin. Westbridge Pharmaceuticals hired her as a junior research associate. Starting salary, $42,000. To Claire, it might as well have been $1 million. She had her own desk, her own computer, her own lab bench. She bought herself one good suit from Ann Taylor Loft. Charcoal gray, professional, serious. She wore it to her first day like armor. The lab was in a gleaming building off Davis Drive, all glass and steel and ambitious architecture. Her supervisor, Dr. Richard Carver, was 43, with silver just starting at his temples and a way of explaining things that made you feel smart for understanding, not stupid for not knowing. He seemed impressed by her work ethic, her attention to detail, her ability to catch errors others missed. "You've got a good eye, Donovan," he'd say, reviewing her data. "Keep this up." She kept it up. God, did she keep it up. While her peers left at 5 p.m. for happy hours at Tyler's taproom, Claire stayed until the janitor kicked her out. While they used sick days for hangovers, she came in with bronchitis, running experiments between coughing fits. When equipment broke, she learned to fix it herself, watching YouTube videos on her phone, saving the department thousands in service calls. She became the one everyone turned to. "Ask Claire, she'll know. Claire can handle that. Don't worry, Claire never drops the ball." And she didn't, not once. Not when her father had his first heart attack and she flew back to Philly on a red-eye, worked a full day, then flew back that night. Not when she miscarried at 11 weeks, alone in a bathroom stall at work, then finished her presentation an hour later because the clinical trial couldn't wait. Not when her marriage was falling apart and her husband was texting another woman while sitting across from her at dinner. Oh, right, the husband. I should tell you about Tom. She met him in 2005 at a conference in Raleigh. He was presenting on supply chain optimization, which should have been boring but somehow wasn't when he explained it. He had this way of making mundane things sound revolutionary, of making you lean in to hear more. Brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled. Hands that gestured wildly when he got excited about something. A laugh that came from deep in his chest. They had their first date at a Mexican restaurant near Brightleaf Square. He ordered for them in terrible Spanish that made the waiter wince, but he was so earnest about it that Claire found it charming. They talked until the restaurant closed, then walked around Duke's East Campus until 2 a.m., their voices echoing off the Gothic buildings. "I feel like I can tell you anything," Tom said, stopping under a streetlight. Claire felt it too. That recognition. That sense of finally being seen by someone. They married 2 years later. Small ceremony at the Durham courthouse. Reception at a brewery. Claire's dress from David's Bridal on clearance. They couldn't afford a honeymoon, so they drove to Asheville for a long weekend, stayed at a bed and breakfast where the floors creaked and the shower ran cold, and it was perfect. Everything was perfect. Until it wasn't. The thing about invisible erosion is that you don't notice it happening. One day, you're newlyweds eating Chinese takeout on the floor of your empty apartment, planning your future between bites of lo mein. The next, you're strangers who happen to share a mortgage. Tom got promoted, then promoted again. His conferences became client dinners, became golf weekends, became a life that existed parallel to Claire's but never intersecting. He'd text her about household logistics, dishwashers making that noise again, or property tax bill came, but never, "How was your day?" or "I'm thinking about you." They had 2 kids. Emma in 2009, during the recession when Claire was terrified they'd both lose their jobs. James in 2011, when things had stabilized, but Claire was working 60-hour weeks. She pumped breast milk in a supply closet at work, labeled the bags with a Sharpie, stored them in a cooler she hid under her desk because the department didn't have a designated space for nursing mothers. She handled everything: daycare pickup and drop-off, pediatrician appointments, school supplies, birthday parties, science fair projects, parent-teacher conferences where teachers gushed about how brilliant her children were, how organized, how prepared, and Claire would smile and nod while calculating how many hours of sleep she'd lost, making sure they had everything they needed. Tom coached Little League on Saturdays. The other parents called him such an involved father. Claire, who'd been up since 5 a.m. washing uniforms and packing snacks and applying sunscreen, was just Emma and James's mom. At work, it was the same shadow life. Her research on targeted drug delivery was groundbreaking. She knew it, felt it in her bones, but somehow her name kept sliding off publications. First author became second, became et al. Her presentations became Carver's presentations. Her innovations became team efforts. The moment she finally saw it clearly was at the 2018 annual meeting. She'd spent 3 months preparing a presentation on her novel approach to ligand-receptor binding. The night before, Carver asked to review her slides. The next morning, he stood at the podium, delivering her work word for word while she sat in the audience, invisible. The applause was thunderous. Carver smiled, gracious, humble. "We at Westbridge are committed to pushing boundaries," he said, and Claire felt something inside her crack. Not break, not shatter, just crack. A hairline fracture that would spiderweb through everything that came after. But here's what Westbridge didn't know, what Tom didn't know, what nobody knew. Claire wasn't just taking it anymore. She was documenting everything. Every late night in the lab, she photographed her notebooks with her phone. Every breakthrough, she emailed herself from her personal account with timestamps. Every innovation, she filed provisional patents with her own money, a lawyer in Raleigh who specialized in intellectual property for a cousin's discount. While they thought she was being the good soldier, the reliable one, the office mom who would always clean up their messes, she was building something they couldn't steal. She was building the Donovan vector. Part 2. The discovery that changed everything. Let me tell you about Thursday nights in Claire's house. After the kids went to bed, after Tom retreated to his office to review quarterly reports, after the dishwasher hummed its familiar cycle, Claire would descend into the basement. She'd converted the unfinished space into a makeshift lab. Nothing fancy: a workbench from Home Depot, a microscope she'd bought from a university surplus auction, a second-hand freezer that wheezed but kept samples at -80 degrees Celsius. The walls were bare concrete that wept moisture in summer, and the fluorescent light flickered with a frequency that gave her headaches. But it was hers. The only space in her life that was entirely hers. She'd tell Tom she was doing continuing education. He never asked for details. Why would he? Claire handling things quietly, independently, without bothering anyone. That was just what Claire did. Down in that basement, surrounded by the smell of concrete and old cardboard, she was working on something that would revolutionize drug delivery. See, Westbridge's approach was like using a battering ram to open a door. Effective, sure, but crude. Destructive. Their delivery vehicles crashed through cell membranes, dumped their pharmaceutical payloads, and hoped for the best. Claire's approach was elegant, surgical. She'd developed a vector that could read cellular surfaces like a map, finding the exact right receptor, binding with perfect specificity, delivering medication exactly where it needed to go with minimal collateral damage. She called it the Donovan vector, writing her name in bold letters in her notebook, underlining it 3 times. The breakthrough came on a February night in 2023. Snow was falling, unusual for Durham, and the kids had used a snow day to build a lopsided snowman in the front yard. Claire had helped for exactly 15 minutes before her phone buzzed with urgent emails from work, problems only she could solve. But that night, after everyone was asleep, she ran the assay that would change everything. The binding efficiency was 94%. The specificity was unprecedented. The adaptive mechanism she'd built into the vector actually worked. It could modify its approach based on cellular feedback. She stared at the data, hands trembling. This wasn't just an improvement on existing technology. This was a leap forward. This was the kind of discovery that got you Nobel nominations, that founded companies, that changed lives. She photographed every page of data, uploaded it to 3 different cloud services, emailed her lawyer with the subject line, "File immediately." Then she sat on that cold basement floor, surrounded by her makeshift equipment and borrowed dreams, and cried. Not from sadness, from rage. Because she knew with absolute certainty, that if she presented this at Westbridge, it would be stolen. Oh, they'd go through the motions. Pat her on the head, give her a Team Excellence Award with a $500 bonus, maybe even make her second author on the paper. But the patent would be filed under Westbridge's umbrella. The credit would go to Carver, or whatever golden boy they were grooming that quarter. She'd become the ghostwriter of her own discovery. That night, Claire Donovan decided she was done being a ghost. Part 3. The Day Everything Changed. March 15th, 2024. Mark that date. That's the day Westbridge Pharmaceuticals made the biggest mistake in its corporate history. It started like any other Friday. Claire arrived at 6:45 a.m., beating even the security guard. She made coffee for the department. She always did, because if she didn't, they'd all stand around helplessly until someone else took pity. She reviewed data from the night shift. She fixed 3 separate crisis situations before 9 a.m., all while Carver was in his office practicing his golf swing with a putter he kept behind the door. The email came at 9:47 a.m. Mandatory meeting, conference room 3A, 10 a.m. She knew. Something in her bones knew. Maybe it was the way Carver avoided eye contact when she passed his office. Maybe it was the HR rep she'd spotted in the parking lot, the one who only showed up for terminations. Maybe it was just 21 years of experience telling her that when you're invisible, you're also disposable. She saved everything on her computer to a thumb drive, cleared her personal items from her desk, not that there were many. A photo of Emma and James, a stress ball shaped like a brain that James had given her for Christmas, a mug that said, "World's okayest mom," that Emma had made in art class. Conference room 3A was the one with glass walls, where everyone could watch your humiliation in real time. Carver was there, fidgeting with his phone. The HR rep, Shannon, had a folder that might as well have had "Your life is over" printed on it. "Claire," Carver started, not quite meeting her eyes. "You know we value your contributions." She let him talk. Strategic restructuring, portfolio optimization, difficult decisions, budget constraints. The words washed over her like white noise, corporate speak designed to obscure the simple truth. You did everything for us, and now we don't need you anymore. Your severance package is quite generous, maybe Sharon said, sliding the folder across the table. 3 months' salary, continued health insurance through the quarter. We'll also provide a positive reference. Claire opened the folder, skimmed the documents. Standard termination agreement, non-compete clause. And there, buried on page 3, the knife twist. All work product developed during employment remains sole property of Westbridge Pharmaceuticals. She almost laughed. Almost. "I'll need to review this with my lawyer," she said, her voice steady as granite. Carver's eyebrows rose. "Your lawyer?" "Yes, Richard. My lawyer. You know, the person who makes sure I don't sign away my rights while you're playing golf on company time." The filly came out then, sharp and unforgiving. "Maybe." Sharon shifted uncomfortably. Carver's face reddened. "There's no need for hostility," he said. "Hostility?" Claire stood, gathering the folder. "Richard, I've been here 21 years. I've missed my kids' recitals for your deadlines. I've solved problems you couldn't even identify. I've built half your portfolio from scratch, and you're ending this with a 9-minute meeting in a fishbowl conference room." She looked him dead in the eye. "The only hostility here is the fact that you think I'll go quietly." She left then, walking through the lab one last time. Her colleagues avoided her eyes. They knew, they all knew, and they were all terrified it would be them next. Only Marcus, the youngest lab tech, met her gaze. He mouthed, "I'm sorry," and she nodded, filing his face away for later. The security guard walked her to her car, company policy, as if she might steal beakers or sabotage experiments, as if she hadn't already taken everything that mattered. She sat in her Honda Civic, yes, still the Civic, 187,000 miles and counting, and pulled out her phone. She had 3 calls to make. First, her lawyer. David, it's happening. File everything now. Second, Arya Kwan. They'd met at conferences, 2 women who'd learned to speak louder to be heard at all. Arya had just raised $50 million for her startup, Oravion Bio. Arya? You said to call if I was ever free. I'm free. Third, Daniel. Daniel Hale. Brilliant biochemist. Terrible timing. They'd met 20 years ago when both were married to other people, both drowning in early career pressure. He'd made her laugh at a particularly brutal conference in Boston, finding her crying in a stairwell after her presentation had been credited to someone else. That bad? He'd asked, sitting beside her on the cold concrete steps. I'm invisible, she'd said, the words coming out raw and honest. No, he'd said simply. You're just surrounded by people who are afraid of how bright you shine. They'd become friends. The kind of friends who sent each other research papers with sarcastic commentary. The kind who grabbed coffee at conferences and talked until their voices went hoarse. The kind who carefully, deliberately, never crossed the line they both felt humming between them. His wife had gotten sick, cancer, long and brutal, and Claire had sent meals, research on clinical trials, stupid jokes to make him smile. After his wife passed, Claire was getting divorced, and the timing was still wrong. Always wrong, but the connection never faded. Now he consulted for biotech startups, a free agent with a reputation for seeing potential where others saw problems. They fired me, she said when he answered. Idiots, he replied immediately. What do you need? A witness, she said. Someone to watch what happens next. Done. Claire? Yeah? They're going to regret this. She smiled for the first time that day. Oh, I'm counting on it. That night, she drove home through Research Triangle Park, past all the gleaming buildings full of people who thought they were changing the world. The radio played something forgettable. The spring air smelled like pine pollen and possibility. Tom was in his recliner when she got home, watching ESPN. He looked up briefly. You're home early, he said. I got fired, she replied, setting down her box of personal items. He muted the TV. What? Why? Restructuring. Jesus, okay. Well, we'll figure it out. I mean, my salary can cover the mortgage. We might have to cut back on some things, but... Tom, she interrupted, I'm not looking for another job. He frowned. What do you mean? I mean, I'm done. Done being invisible. Done being reliable. Done being the one who handles everything while everyone else takes credit. He stared at her like she'd started speaking Finnish. Claire, you're upset. Let's talk about this tomorrow when you've had time to process. She looked at him then, really looked at him. When had he gotten so soft around the middle? When had his face become so patronizing? When had she stopped loving him and started simply coexisting? There's leftover lasagna in the fridge, she said, heading for the basement. Where are you going? To work on something that matters. Part 4. The plan takes shape. That weekend, while Tom took the kids to their soccer games and played dates, activities he suddenly had to manage alone, Claire transformed her basement into a command center. She spread her notebooks across the workbench, 21 years of meticulous documentation. Every experiment, every breakthrough, every innovation that had been presented as someone else's work. But the Donovan vector, that was hers alone. Filed with the patent office before Westbridge even knew it existed. Developed on her own time, with her own money, in her own space. Her phone buzzed. Arya Kwan. I've reviewed your preliminary data, Arya said without preamble. This is extraordinary. When can we meet? Monday, Claire said. But Arya, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about the science. This is about attribution. My name stays on everything. Claire? Aria's voice carried a smile. I've been erased, too. Your name won't just be on it. It'll be in lights. They met at a small restaurant in downtown Durham, the kind of place where startup deals were made over overpriced small plates. Aria was everything Claire had learned to recognize as powerful. Sharp suit, direct eye contact, the ability to make silence work for her instead of against her. Show me everything, Aria said. Claire did. Not just the data, but the notebooks, the timestamps, the receipts for equipment, the paper trail that proved beyond any shadow of doubt that the Donovan vector was hers. Aria sat back, wine untouched. They have no idea, do they? What you've built. They knew I was good at my job, Claire said. They just never wondered what else I might be good at. Their loss. Aria pulled out her phone, typed rapidly. I'm sending you our terms. Signing bonus, salary, equity stake, and your own lab. Real resources, not basement equipment. And Claire, your name goes on everything. First author, every time. Claire read the offer. The number made her dizzy, more than she'd made in 5 years at Westbridge. There's one thing, Aria added. We announce Monday, big. I want every biotech reporter in the Triangle to know that Claire Donovan just changed the game. Claire thought of Carver's face, of 21 years of being reliable, invisible Claire, of her mother, dying with swollen wrists and no Wikipedia page to show for a lifetime of work. Monday, she agreed. That night, Daniel came over. Tom was at his brother's watching the game. He'd stopped even pretending to include Claire in these plans. The kids were at sleepovers. The house was quiet except for the dishwasher's familiar hum. She made coffee. Good coffee, not the break room swill she'd tolerated for decades. They sat at her kitchen table, the same one where she'd worked out the binding mechanisms for the vector. You're really doing this, he said, not a question. I've already done it, she corrected. Now I'm just making sure everyone knows. He studied her face. You look different, lighter. I feel like I can breathe, she admitted. For the first time in 20 years, I'm not carrying everyone else's weight. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. In another life, this would be when they finally crossed that line, when 20 years of careful boundaries dissolved. Instead, Daniel reached across the table and took her hand. Just held it. I'm proud of you, he said simply, not for the discovery. For finally letting yourself be seen. She squeezed his hand, then let go. Some things were too precious to complicate. Some love was better left unspoken, a bright thread running through the fabric of life without ever becoming the whole pattern. After he left, Claire sat in her quiet kitchen and planned the Monday that would change everything. But first, she had one more call to make. Marcus? She said when the young lab tech answered. It's Doctor. Donovan, how would you like a real job? Part 5. The announcement that shook the industry. Monday morning, 7 a.m., the press release hit every major biotech publication simultaneously. Eurevian Bio acquires exclusive rights to revolutionary Donovan vector technology. Dr. Claire Donovan, formerly of Westbridge Pharmaceuticals, appointed Chief Science Officer. Novel drug delivery system promises to transform targeted therapy. By 7:15, Claire's phone was vibrating so hard it traveled across her kitchen counter. Former colleagues, industry contacts, reporters. Even her hairdresser texted, "Is this you? Holy shit." But the best message came from someone unexpected, Dr. Jennifer Chen, a brilliant scientist who'd left Westbridge 5 years earlier after being passed over for promotion 3 times. I've been waiting for this day. Give them hell. At Westbridge, the executive floor was in chaos. Claire knew because Marcus was still there, sending her real-time updates from the bathroom where he'd hidden to text. Carver just threw his phone. Actually threw it. Emergency board meeting called. CEO flying back from Bermuda. Legal is here. They look scared. Sharon from HR is crying in the parking lot. The stock market opened at 9:30. Westbridge dropped 8% in the first hour. Aurelion climbed 14%. At 10 a.m., Claire walked into Aurelion's headquarters wearing a new suit. Not charcoal gray, bright blue, the color of electricity, of possibility, of being absolutely impossible to ignore. The entire team was waiting in the lobby, applauding. Not polite golf claps, real applause. For her. Arya stood at the front, grinning. "Dr. Donovan, your lab is ready. Would you like to see it?" The lab was everything Westbridge's had never been. State-of-the-art equipment, a window with actual sunlight, a desk with her name on it, not a plastic placard, but an engraved metal plate. Dr. Claire Donovan, Chief Science Officer. "We have 12 candidates for your team," Arya said. "All brilliant, all undervalued at their current positions. I thought you might want to build something different here." Claire looked at the resumes. More than half were women. Several were over 40. One was 62. "Invite them all for interviews," she said. "And Arya? I already hired one, Marcus Chen. He starts tomorrow." That afternoon, Westbridge's lawyers called, then called again, then sent a series of increasingly frantic emails. The final one, clearly written by Carver himself, was beautiful in its desperation. "Claire, there seems to be some misunderstanding about intellectual property developed during your tenure. We should discuss this professionally." She forwarded it to her lawyer with 2 words, "Handle it." David's response was a work of art. 3 pages of legal precedent, timeline documentation, and receipts. The closing paragraph was particularly devastating. Dr. Donovan's innovations were developed independently, outside of Westbridge facilities, using personal resources, and were filed with the Patent Office prior to her termination. Any claim to her intellectual property would require Westbridge to acknowledge that they were aware of and benefited from her unpaid overtime and personal investment in research, opening them to significant labor violations. "We suggest you reconsider your position." Westbridge's response came within an hour. "Upon review, we have no claim to the technology in question." Claire smiled. They'd just admitted, in writing, that they had no idea what she'd been working on. 21 years, and they'd never once wondered what she did with her nights and weekends. That evening, she went home to find Tom sitting at the kitchen table with printed articles about the announcement. "This is what you were working on in the basement?" he asked, incredulous. "Yes. Why didn't you tell me?" She looked at him, this man she'd once loved, who she'd built a life with, who had 2 children with her, and realized he genuinely didn't understand. "When would I have told you, Tom? During the 30 seconds you look up from ESPN? In the text messages about property taxes? During the parent-teacher conferences you missed?" He flinched. "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" She sat across from him, the kitchen table between them like an ocean. "When did you last ask about my work? My actual work, not whether I'd handled the household logistics?" He opened his mouth, closed it. The silence stretched. "I don't know you anymore," he finally said. "No," Claire agreed. "You never did." Part 6. The Revenge Unfolds. The next 3 months were a symphony of vindication, each note more satisfying than the last. First movement. The talent exodus. Claire didn't even have to recruit. They came to her. Every overlooked scientist, every brilliant mind that Westbridge had treated as furniture, every woman who'd been told she was lucky to be there. Dr. Jennifer Chen joined as head of clinical development. Marcus Chen, no relation, became her lead lab technician. Dr. Amira Patel, who'd been passed over for promotion 6 times at Westbridge, took over regulatory affairs. By May, Westbridge had lost 30% of their research staff. The ones who remained were the Carvers of the world, good at golf, great at taking credit, terrible at actual science. Second movement, the conference circuit. Claire had been invited to speak at every major biotech conference that year. She accepted them all. Her presentations were standing room only, not because of the science, though that was groundbreaking, but because of how she presented it. "I spent 21 years being told my work wasn't quite good enough to have my name on it," she'd say, looking directly at the audience. "I'm here to tell you that if you're doing the work, your name belongs on it, in bold. Font size 16 minimum." The audiences, especially the women, would roar. At the International Biotech Summit in Boston, she was scheduled to speak right after Carver. She sat in the front row, making eye contact as he fumbled through slides about innovative approaches that sounded hollow without her behind them. When she took the stage, she smiled warmly. "That was interesting, Doctor. Carver, now let me show you what actual innovation looks like." The demonstration of the Donovan vector's adaptive mechanism left the audience gasping. The question period went 30 minutes over. Carver left before it ended. Third movement, the market response. Orivian's first quarter with the Donovan vector exceeded every projection. 3 major pharmaceutical companies entered bidding wars for licensing rights. The FDA fast-tracked their clinical trial application. Meanwhile, Westbridge's quarterly report was a masterclass in corporate humiliation. Revenue down 22%, 3 failed trials, a shareholder revolt that led to an emergency board meeting. The coup de grace came in July. Westbridge needed to license technology for their flagship cancer treatment. The only viable option? The Donovan vector. The licensing agreement Claire demanded was brutal: triple market rate, quarterly audits, and one non-negotiable clause: any use of the technology must include the attribution powered by the Donovan vector created by Dr. Claire Donovan. Every presentation, every publication, every investor meeting, they'd have to say her name. "This is extortion," Carver said during the negotiation call. "No," Claire replied calmly. "This is market rate for revolutionary technology. If you'd recognized it when you had it, you wouldn't be paying for it now." They signed. They had no choice. The day the agreement was finalized, Claire received a gift: a bottle of champagne from the women's still at Westbridge, with a note: "Thank you for showing us it's possible." She didn't drink it alone. That evening, her daughter Emma came by the new apartment Claire had rented downtown, modern, minimal, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Durham skyline. "Mom," Emma said, curled up on the couch with her own glass, "I need to apologize." "For what?" "For never seeing you. Really seeing you. I thought you were just Mom, you know? The one who handled everything. I didn't realize you were also this." Claire pulled her daughter close. "I didn't let you see it. I was so busy being invisible, I forgot I was allowed to shine." "Not anymore," Emma said. "No," Claire agreed, looking out at the city lights. "Not anymore." But the revenge wasn't complete. Not yet. Because Westbridge had done more than steal her work. They'd stolen 21 years of her life. They'd made her small, made her doubt herself, made her believe that being essential meant being unseen. The real revenge would be making them see exactly what they'd thrown away. Part 7. The Final Strike. September 2024, the annual Westbridge investor meeting, the one where they needed to convince shareholders not to abandon ship. They'd spent weeks preparing, hiring consultants, crafting the perfect narrative of recovery and innovation. The centerpiece of their presentation? A new cancer therapy that would revolutionize patient outcomes. The therapy powered by the Donovan vector. Claire knew because she had to approve every usage. She'd signed off on this one with particular satisfaction. The meeting was held at the Durham Convention Center, a gleaming space meant to project success and stability. Claire attended as Oravion's representative. After all, they were now a valued partner. She sat in the third row, visible enough to be seen, far enough back to watch everything unfold. Carver took the stage, looking older, grayer, diminished. The last 6 months had aged him a decade. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone, "Westbridge Pharmaceuticals remains at the forefront of innovation." The presentation was slick, professional, desperate, charts showing projected recovery, promises of new developments, and then the moment Claire had been waiting for. Our revolutionary cancer therapy, powered by the Donovan vector created by Dr. Claire Donovan, represents the future of targeted treatment. There it was, her name, on the main screen, in letters 3 feet tall. The investors started murmuring. Someone in the back called out, "Isn't that the scientist you fired?" Carver's face went red. "Dr. Donovan has moved on to other opportunities. We maintain a positive partnership." Claire stood. The room went silent. Every head turned. "Actually," she said, her voice carrying clearly, "I'd like to clarify something." She walked to the aisle, not toward the stage, but simply standing where everyone could see her. "The Donovan vector was developed in my basement, on my own time, with my own money, while I was working 60-hour weeks at Westbridge. I created it not because of Westbridge, but in spite of it. Because after 21 years of having my work stolen, my contributions erased, my innovations credited to others, I decided to build something they couldn't take." She looked directly at the board members in the front row. "Every dollar you make from my technology is a reminder that you had genius in your building and you threw it away because you couldn't see past your own assumptions. You didn't just lose an employee, you lost the future." She turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and that talent exodus you're experiencing? That's not ending. Because every undervalued scientist, every overlooked innovator, every invisible worker bee who actually keeps your company running, they're all seeing what's possible when you stop accepting crumbs." She walked out in absolute silence. By the time she reached her car, her phone was exploding. Reporters, investors, scientists from around the world. But the only message that mattered was from Daniel. "That was the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed." The aftermath was swift and brutal. Westbridge's stock fell another 15%. 3 board members resigned. Carver was quietly removed as department head, given a meaningless advisory role that everyone knew was a soft landing before full retirement. But Claire wasn't watching. She was in her lab at Orivion, working on the next generation of the Donovan vector with her team of formerly invisible scientists. Marcus knocked on her door. "Dr. Donovan, there's someone here to see you." It was a young woman, maybe 25, nervous, holding a folder like it contained state secrets. "Dr. Donovan, I'm Sarah Martinez. I work at Westbridge. Well, worked. I just quit." Claire gestured for her to sit. "I've been following your story," Sarah continued, words tumbling out. "I've been there 2 years, and I'm already invisible. They take my ideas, my work, everything. I thought that was just how it was. But then you showed us it doesn't have to be." She opened the folder, revealing pages of meticulous notes. "I've been working on something, on my own time, like you did. And I was wondering, could I show it to you?" Claire looked at this young woman, brilliant and scared and determined, and saw herself 20 years ago. "Show me everything," she said. Epilogue: The Life She Chose. Comment below where you're listening from. I want to know if this story of invisible labor and sweet revenge resonates differently depending on where you are in your journey. 1 year later. Claire stood at the podium of the Nobel Prize announcement conference. No, she hadn't won, not yet. But the Donovan vector had been named as groundbreaking technology that would likely influence the next decade of medical advancement. Her name, in headlines, around the world. Tom had asked for a divorce, unable to handle what he called the new Claire. She'd given it to him, along with the house she'd never wanted in the cul-de-sac she'd always hated. She kept the kids, who now bragged about their mother to anyone who would listen. She lived in a downtown Durham loft now, all exposed brick and industrial windows, the kind of space that felt like possibility. Daniel came for dinner twice a week, bringing wine and conversation that lasted until midnight. They still hadn't crossed that line, but the not crossing had become its own form of intimacy, deeper than any relationship she'd had with Tom. Aurelian had gone public. Claire's equity stake made her wealthy enough that her children would never know the fear of poverty she'd grown up with, that her father would have died knowing his daughter had outrun the closed steel mills of Bensalem. But the real satisfaction came in smaller moments. Like when she got an email from a woman in Ohio who'd demanded attribution for her work after reading Claire's story. Like when her mother's former colleague reached out to say she'd started documenting her contributions, inspired by Claire's example. Like when she walked through Aurevion's labs and saw her team, formerly invisible scientists now leading groundbreaking research with their names in bold font, size 16 minimum. The revenge was complete, but it had transformed into something else. Not just vindication, but revolution. Not just personal triumph, but collective uprising. Every woman who'd ever been called the office mom while doing the work of 3 people. Every scientist whose name had been shuffled to et al. Every invisible worker whose labor held up corporations that would discard them without a second thought. They were all standing up, stepping forward, refusing to be erased. And it had started with one woman in a basement, refusing to let 21 years of invisible labor disappear into corporate PowerPoints. Claire Donovan had gotten her revenge, but more than that, she'd gotten her name back, her work back, her life back. And that was the sweetest victory of all. The world had tried to make her invisible. Instead, she'd become impossible to ignore. And here's the thing I want you to really understand as you're listening to this. Claire's story isn't unique. It's happening right now, in offices and labs and hospitals and schools around the world. Women carrying the weight of invisible labor, keeping everything running, getting none of the credit. Maybe you're one of them. Maybe you're listening to this on your commute to a job where you do everything and get thanked for nothing. Maybe you're that person everyone depends on, but no one sees. If you are, I want you to know something. Document everything. Keep your receipts. Build something they can't steal. And when the moment comes, and it will come, when they try to discard you like you never mattered, that's when you show them exactly what they threw away. That's when you make them say your name. That's when you transform from invisible to unforgettable. Because revenge isn't about destroying those who wronged you. It's about building something so brilliant, so undeniable, that they have to watch your success from the ruins of their own poor judgment. Claire Donovan did it. And honestly, so can you. Thank you for listening to this story. If it resonated with you, if you felt invisible in your own life, drop a comment below. Share your own story of invisible labor or sweet vindication. Let's make the invisible visible, one story at a time. And remember, your name deserves to be in bold. Font size 16 minimum. Like and subscribe if you want to hear more stories of people who refused to stay invisible, who took their revenge not with destruction but with undeniable success. Because trust me, I've got plenty more where this came from. Until next time, this is your reminder. You're not invisible. You never were. They just weren't brave enough to see how bright you could shine.